are looking at a letter that Infected Blood Australia has just sent to our nation's newly elected Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. G'day, my name's Charles Mackenzie and I'm the President of Infected Blood Australia, and we are a campaign group for the Australian victims of the infected blood scandal. Now, this scandal was global, and I first found out about it in the mid-1980s. A kid I went to school with, he was a haemophiliac, and he was given a blood treatment for some bruising that he had. So this wasn't a life or death situation. He was given this new treatment, and this new treatment was made by the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood and by the Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. It was known as Factor VIII. Now, this was a new treatment to Australia in the 1980s, but the British had been using it for some years prior. And that's where the scandal begins. We now know, thanks to the largest inquiry in British history, which is called the Infected Blood Inquiry, which I've been a witness. I've been assisting the British with their investigation, that also has tentacles here that stretch all the way to Australia, and I'll explain why. We now know, through evidence that the inquiry has seen, that British authorities engaged in a cover-up. In 1974, UK health authorities became aware that these blood treatments that were used by people like that kid that I went to school with, haemophiliacs, these treatments were contaminated. The treatment in question was this newer treatment, this mass-pooled blood product known as Factor VIII. And they knew, these clinicians got together and they actually knew that this Factor VIII was transmitting hepatitis to patients, including to children. You know, they were doing biopsies and discovering that children had liver scarring. Now, that's highly unusual and certainly should sound alarm bells. Well, that would be the lawful thing to do anyway. But they didn't do that. Instead, and this is important to tune into, in their own words, they played down the risks so as to preserve the reputation of this medicine that they had introduced. Now, this is 1974, and this is happening in the United Kingdom. Now, the British essentially created our health system here in Australia. The Australian Medical Association, just a few decades ago, I think it was the British Medical Association, and the Australian Red Cross was the British Red Cross, and the Australian blood supply was set up by the British protocols, British expertise. In fact, we had their specialists who introduced these haemophilia protocols. And so this product that the British had lied about to preserve its great reputation, even though it was giving children liver cancer and hepatitis and cirrhosis and killing people, this treatment came to Australia years later. And in the 1980s, children would go into hospitals and their parents would be, to some extent, coerced into these new treatments. And we're familiar with coercion, aren't we, these last few years? And, you know, this kid's got some bruising, and they say, right, well, here you go, here's a treatment. And that treatment was known to transmit viruses. And that boy, yes, he acquired hepatitis, but the bigger problem at that time for him was that he'd also developed AIDS. Now, he died in 1989, and the day that he died, my mother came in and told me, and I promised her and myself and him and his memory that I would get justice for him. And in another bizarre twist in this whole scenario, I was also a contaminated blood victim, but I didn't know that at that time. The boy in question, whose name I won't mention now for legal reasons, he has a protected name in the courts, a name of H. His parents lost the court case where they were trying to get help for him because in the 1980s, when he was knowingly infected, knowingly given these contaminated blood treatments because the British government had lied, and so Australia allowed this garbage to be given to our patients, our haemophiliacs, and 1,400 haemophiliacs were killed. Okay, this is criminal negligence, this is murder, this is manslaughter, it's whatever a judge will determine. But on the face of it, it's beyond serious. Parents have had to bury young children. And I and they are going to get answers. I haven't been doing this for as long as I've been doing it for anything less. Now, there are many tainted blood victims, survivors today and their families who need compensation, and they need financial assistance immediately. In this letter that I've sent to Australia's Prime Minister, I've asked him to turn on financial assistance. I'll be sharing this across social media tomorrow. I've asked him to turn on I've asked him to turn on financial assistance. Okay? And to do so immediately because, as I say, haemophiliacs are victims of crime. And they just are. And for them to not have access to the type of assistance that's been made available to haemophiliacs in other first world countries is criminal. I'm not suggesting that Australia's Prime Minister has committed a crime yet, because he's only just come into office and he is now the Prime Minister. So that would be unreasonable to suggest that he's done anything wrong. Whether the Labour Party and Liberal parties have done something wrong over the decades because they haven't had an inquiry, and now people in the United Kingdom, very prominent figures in the United Kingdom, because of what they've seen come out of their investigation into their infected blood scandal, are saying, how could it be that this was not investigated by successive governments earlier? And yet, in Australia, there's not one mention of it. There's no assistance to victims, let alone inquiry. So this letter to Australia's Prime Minister is extremely important. And it's important to me personally as well, because just recently I've been informed that I've come out of remission. And this means that, I hope, as I said before in a lot of my videos, I'm a health fanatic. I'm very interested in medicine and all sorts of alternative means that we might use to extend our lives. And I've said before, I hope to live to 99 like my Welsh grandfather. But this problem that I've got is also affecting my motor function. And I have fits and I'm pretty ill. My health now is, I'm kept alive through cannabis at this point. I don't want the heavy painkillers or any of that. And I'm waiting now to decide what palliative care or what the scenario is with my doctors. As I say, I really hope to pull through it. I hope to live to 99 like my Welsh grandfather. But, as I say, I haven't been doing this for this long. I really started thinking about it and researching it in the 1980s. I then became I've been full-on campaigning for decades now. And just to make sure that the survivors and the families of haemophiliacs don't miss out on justice, they need to be assisted immediately, Prime Minister. And to anyone watching, they really do. Just to be sure, I've sent this letter and it's got the date. And I will now talk to my lawyers and I will make a criminal complaint if there is not assistance, because people's health is getting worse through this. They're being harmed. There's no reason why governments are legally obligated to assist people. These people have got cancer. They've been through trauma. The government's aware there's been a cover-up. They're aware that the successive governments have failed. They're aware of the situation. The cover-ups happened right around the world, not just Australia. So the British have a major hand. I just spoke earlier about how the British lied about the safety of these blood products, and that's what I would like to talk to the Prime Minister about. What can we do, Prime Minister? This is largely a British scandal. And it came down to Australia through those historical reasons I spoke about, the fact that we had British involvement in the establishment of large aspects of our health system, and in particular our blood system. And they lied, and it cost haemophiliacs everything, Prime Minister, and I've been here for decades, and they need to be immediately assisted. Their families deserve justice. Parents, buried children. And there's still survivors out there, people with cancer. We need them helped immediately, without delay. And if they are not helped in a timely fashion, now that you have been made aware, that your government has been made aware, because of the harm that's being done, and because of deaths that have been hastened through a lack of care from government, because of that, and because of the evidence that we have that shows it was done knowingly, I will be making a criminal complaint on behalf of the Australian victims of our nation's worst treatment scandal, on behalf of Australia's haemophilia community. Thank you.